My name is Matt Nash, and I'm in Mr. Sarles' 4th hour AP Stats class, and my article was about Does Tutoring Actually Work? So, the purpose of my article was to find the effectiveness of tutoring through a statistical analysis of academic standards and cognitive learning strategies. So basically, my experiment was to see how effective one-on-one tutoring or peer tutoring from another student was to improve overall grades as well as help students understand material better and understand and learn more quickly and to tailor it more to themselves. So how the experiment actually worked was there was a SRS of 100 students from the University of Granada in Spain. They were all around the same age of 18 years old, and they all were in the same fields of civil engineering, economics, pharmacy, and chemical engineering. And they were randomly assigned into two groups, a treatment group and a control group. And the control group was the exact same in age, gender, and even fell under the same degrees, as I mentioned before. And there was also another SRS taken of older students who were around 24 years old and fell under the same fields as I mentioned before again. And that group was known as the tutors. And then the other group were the students that would become tutored by the older group. So the actual students were all randomly assigned to a tutor where the treatment kids would go and have a 90-minute tutoring session once a week for 10 weeks where they would get help with classwork as well as try to learn new strategies to better understand material in class and to get their classwork done faster and of better quality. And before they began this 10 weeks, they were given a test called the pre-test to measure their cognitive learning strategies and skills. And then at the end of the 10 weeks, which was at the end of their semester, they were given another test called the post-test to measure how far they've grown or improved. And also at the end of this semester, their GPA, success rate, and performance rate all were measured as well. However, the actual tutors also had a procedure they had to go to before this 10 weeks could begin. They went to a 4-hour training session where they were taught basically all the material that they had to teach the kids. They were taught all the homework and like subjects that they would have to explain to the kids they'd be teaching, as well as they learned cognitive learning strategies. So what that basically means is the different ways that people can learn and the different methods that a student could take to better understand material. And those cognitive learning strategies fell under 4 categories: contextual conditions of studying, study planning, the use of study materials, and learning of study content. So they were taught all these strategies and they basically fell under those 4 categories. And then at the end of these 10 weeks, all the tests were given and their overall grades were collected. And then we took that data and used 4 different tests. First of this test was the U of Mann-Weeney test, a value D of Cohen test, a t-test statistic, and we also had p-values. So we take all these tests and run our data through it, and we get these results. So in the top left corner, the first table there is table 1, which is all of the academic content. So the student's GPA, performance rate, and success rate for the treatment group as well as the control group. And there we see the sample size, the average mean, the standard deviation, as well as the d-value I mentioned before. So that's all the academic side. And then on the right hand, you see a long list of all of the different cognitive learning techniques that the tutors were taught and were expected to teach to the students. And there we can see the pre-test and post-test that I mentioned before, and it shows their means, standard deviation, sample size, and t-value again to show how much they changed as well as if they improved in certain areas before they took the test and after they took the test. And then we look here and we see more of the cognitive learning strategies. This time they are grouped in the 4 categories that I mentioned before, and they are also bracketed off for the treatment group and the control group, as well as looking at it from the pre-test and the post-test. And again, we're given the mean, standard deviation, d-values, and sample size. If we take all this data and we look at it, we come to a couple conclusions. The first of this conclusion is in Table 1, where although the GPA performance rate and success rate are slightly different, there is no statistical significance between the treatment group and the control group. However, in Table 2, after we ran a t-test, we found that there was a statistical significance difference between the control group and the treatment group in the categories of contextual conditions of study, study planning, the use of study materials, and learning of study contexts. And we can tell that by looking at our t-test statistic as well as our p-value. And then in Table 3, we ran a t-test again and saw that there was an increase in the 4 cognitive strategies I mentioned before, but only 2 of them were that were able to conclude that there was statistical significance difference between the 2 groups. And the 2 categories that we can conclude that for are contextual conditions of study and study planning. And then we were also able to conclude that there was statistical significance difference in the ability to say no and cut off interactions, as well as overall social skills, which were kind of subcategories to the 4 cognitive strategies. And we can tell all of that by looking at the test statistic and the p-value once again. Now, looking at the article as a whole, I thought this was very well done, and they spent a lot of time and effort to look at the different types of cognitive learning strategies. I did think they left a couple lurking variables, possibilities out there, especially when it came to assuming that that 90 minutes of tutoring a week would have the same effect and same growth for every student and not really take into account the different types of learning that a student may have. I also would have liked them to focus a little more on the academic aspect instead of all the cognitive research that they did, because we only got really one table of data from the academic side and most of the focus went to the cognitive learning. That being said, I find this issue actually very important. There was one of the reasons I chose this topic was because me and a couple other friends started the TRACE tutoring program here at the high school. So this article was super important to me just because I wanted to make sure that if we have tutors at our high school, I want to make sure they're doing their job and helping as many kids as possible. So I really enjoyed the topic of this, and I thought this article was really well done. Thank you for listening to my project.